Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Tradesman channel. Tonight we're going to make a repair on my 1x30-inch belt to benchtop belt grinder. So anyway, if I could, boy, I can never get the words out. But anyhow, this thing has been a very handy tool for me. I bought it in a big group of tools. They discontinued this model, and some things kind of hard to find parts for, but I found that there's a lot of the Delta 1x30 copycats out there, like the Harbor Freight one is a copycat, and it looks like a lot of parts on those fit on this. Now, 1x30 belt grinder, if you have nothing else to shape steel with after you're done forging, making knives or whatever, you know, it really is a handy little tool. It has a high RPM. You can get a lot of different belts for them. It's only 1 inch wide, so it's a little bit slower, but I'm finding it's more important what type of belt you use for different steels, and this is all stuff I'm kind of learning as we go. Now, I'll show you guys what happened. So this thing, the first draw knife I ever made, I was using this to shape it, and it was doing phenomenally, but then this bearing down here gave up the ghost on me, and it kind of got put on a shelf on the sideline for a long time. I needed a plug for a fan, so I did the obviously stupid thing and borrowed part of the cord. So anyway, I've got what I need to fix this now. Now, if you go on most parts places to try to find parts for this, if you're actually looking for strictly Delta parts for this, are really hard to find. Actually, I can't really find them. So the bearing that's in these, so in this idler pulley up here, and then in the idler down here, or your tracking pulley down here, excuse me, it is just a 6202Z bearing. So it's going to have a good dust cap in it, and it's pretty standard size. And if any of you guys are chainsaw guys, this is the bearing that's used in a lot of your Husqvarna saws, the 6202 bearing on the flywheel and the clutch side. This is an extremely common bearing. You can get these of decent quality for $5 or $6 a piece. This one was made in Canada. Now you can get the SKS. I have one of those kicking around in here somewhere. I thought, yeah, right here. So there's another one. This is an SKS brand. Now if you're going to be using these on something like sanders, things like that, you want to make sure that it has a good dust cap in it. If you don't have a good dust cap in it, it's going to be kind of a pain. Now the repair on this is super easy. I've got a little bit of a burr, if I can find it here. I've got a tiny little bit of a burr on this on this shaft here that the bearing, so we're going to clean that up a little bit and just kind of go from there. So anyway, stay tuned. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you on the other side of it. Okay, so Delta has, these are the wheels right here that goes over the bearing. This is what the belt rides on. You can see their crown that kind of helps keep the belt centered. This is on the tracking. It's the same one up top here in that idler pulley. Now you can use that as a contact wheel. It's not the best though, I can tell you that. You don't have a lot of room to move with it, things like that. But so anyway, you want to make sure if you're replacing this bearing, these are the part that's kind of hard to find if you're looking for the Delta OEM stuff. But if you, so I've noticed looking at the other 1x30 belt grinders I've been able to find, these all look like they're exactly the same pretty much. I mean, this Delta right here is pretty much seems to be the forefather of just about all of them that you see now. Now that's kind of nice because it makes finding parts a lot easier. But I just like my older Delta tools. I mean, they did such a good job for so many years on them. It's kind of hard to beat them, especially when you can find them so cheap. Now this bearing should go in here pretty hard. This should be a little difficult to get it in because it has to be tight on that. It's like a hardened rubber wheel. It has to be tight on that so that this wheel doesn't slip when the bearing's turning. Because if that wheel starts slipping, that bearing's the outer race is gonna start wearing a hole through that plastic, and we don't want that. So what I do, very gently, you just tap it. You don't go crazy with it, because when you go crazy with it and you go too far or you ding up that bearing race, that's not going to be very fun for you to try to get it all together. Now there's a lip on the inside here, and you want to make sure you bottom this bearing out against that lip, and you want to make sure it's nice and centered. And she's just about there. Now what do I have? A little punch. So go real gentle with it. You don't have to He-Man it in. The big thing, you're looking just not to damage anything. Try to make sure she's fairly clean. Just kind of gently work it around. Try not to hit the dust cap with your punch or whatever it is you're using. Because if you dimple that in, that might affect the way that the bearing rides. A little bit of sawdust that scraped off. Yeah, there's so many different belts for these. It's awesome how many different belts there are. And the more I get into the metal stuff, the more I'm learning that different belts will give you much different results. And how efficiently you can grind that steel. I'm finding that different steel, some steels might like a ceramic belt, some might like the aluminum oxide. I think the ones I have, the cheap ones here, the zirconia. We'll see how well they work. They've had decent luck, at least for 1080. So when you get that together, you want to make sure that's seated all the way down against that lip. This lip's going to go to the outside, and then you just have to get your bearing on. And that was just a little bit of a burr on there. Must have been when I took it off. I must have burred it some. Oh, if I were my little file, it'd be right here. So just, there's a chamfered edge already on there to help assist you in getting that bearing started. And it's burred over just a tiny little bit there. Now most of the time these little shafts are mild steel, so they're not too hard to work over. I'm just going a little bit. Now this bearing should fit tight on here also, so keep in mind, if you don't have a decently tight fit on this shaft, this darn thing's gonna eat. It'll look like somebody machined it down when these bearings are turning around it, so they have to have a snug fit. Sometimes what you can do if you want to have a bearing go on a little bit easier, you could take the shaft or whatever it is and put it in the freezer. If you put it in the freezer for a couple hours, it shrinks that metal down enough. And if, say, you heat this bearing up a little bit with a hairdryer or something like that, a lot of times it'll slide right down. And then once everything warms back up and this cools back down, all things come together, and bam, you got a good fit. I feel like I'm talking about a damn cooking show right now. So we're just going to try to, very gentle. Now there's a big mystery in my shop of how I found this retaining ring on the first try. It was sitting on a workbench amongst a bunch of stuff in the pit of despair, and I still can't believe we found it that easy, but boy am I glad we did, because that would put me out of business here in this repair trying to get this thing going. And that would be no good. Just make sure that thing's seated all the way in. As you can tell, I use whatever I have to hand. Doesn't matter what it is to help get the job done. I'll be happy to have this thing going. Test it out. There we go. Get a belt on her and see what happens. If you're going to do it like what I'm doing, make sure you don't cut all the way through this outer jacket. I don't like wire nutting cords together, and I could just put a whole new cord on it. It wouldn't be that hard. But I butt splice it, and I use Scotch Super 88 electrical tape. It's a very rubbery tape. It sticks better than most of the other ones. So that's usually what I tend to use. And this is a bench mounted tool. It's not like it's one that I'm dragging around all over the place, because that'd just be no good. But someday I need to go through, I need to get some SJO cord and just go through and start replacing whips on stuff instead of doing this hillbilly fire hazard stuff. So some advice I can give you, try to do this stuff right. Come on, you're almost there. So we went through that, and we didn't cut through any of it. I'm just kind of working it to break it. There we go. It's still going to want to fight coming off, but that's all right. Now, if you're going to use butt splices, don't strip your wires back too far. The whole idea of using the butt splice, it's a nice insulated connector, and it's a very strong connector. And really the proper way to do it is to splice them and heat shrink them. It's probably the best option. But you don't want this sticking out of the barrel. So you got to put that in. Make sure your full wire is encased in that butt splice. Now, if you have decent butt splicing pliers, they're going to have a couple of, you're going to have a smooth spot for insulated stake-ons, and you're going to have a spot in there with that little tooth for non-insulated. Insulated, always use the ones that it's meant for. You go part way up, make sure that you are on the actual metal inside, because that plastic ring in there actually goes quite a ways. So when you're done, it should look something like that. Try to get you in better light. Give it a good tug, make sure you got it on there all right. And if you come across one like that that's broken up, don't use it. That takes away the whole purpose of having a nicely insulated wire connector there. Some of your lineman pliers, they're going to have a spot on there with for doing these, and these give you a pretty nice, actually give you a really nice splice. They're kind of a pain to line up, not as easy as the other ones are, but they really do a nice crimp. So you're going to get a little different mark on there than you do on the other side, but that's not going anywhere. Now this tape is really good electrical tape. It's only 4 something a roll. Don't go to, I see so many people go and buy the cheapest electrical tape they can find, and to me that's craziness. Just go and pony up. It's like $4.50 a roll, and it's actually gonna do something for you. This stuff is really good in the cold. It's good in the heat. It's a good quality tape. And it's just a small price to pay. I mean, you're dealing with electricity, you know what I mean? If you're dealing with electricity, you don't want it, you want to make sure it's good connections. And the stuff will help keep water out. It is not rated as a waterproof. You know, the glue's in it. But I have found it to work very well for that purpose. I mean, if you get a little, I mean, I do a lot of work on units that are outside and they're exposed to the weather. And a lot of times with what I do, we don't do a ton of heat shrinking inside electrical cabinets on HVAC equipment. And granted, that is really the proper way to fix a cord like this if you're going to use splices. But I find this stuff works just amazingly well. I'll use this tape when I'm wrapping wires on well pumps. And like, well, recently we just pulled one that had been in for like 10 years. And the tape was still on it. It had been submersed in water for years. And it was just fine. I like to get a couple wraps on it. You know, a lot of the other stuff, the cheap stuff, it gets brittle really quick with time. So cold makes it brittle. The glues in it comes apart. It's just a pain in the ass. And you don't really need that. Let's test it out. Let's see if it works. I think it'll work just fine. Now, what's handy about these, you have a little gap there. You can use it as a slack belt a little bit. You've got a little planishing bar there. It's not very beefy. It's not like you can just go whole hog against it. The tracking's pretty decent. That's that little knob back there. There's really not much to explain on it, guys. You just kind of turn it on and friggin' go with it. Let's see. That's good sound. But, see, we have some stuff here. Let's see how quick we can remove it on here. Not too bad. Pretty good. Alright, well, I got a nice bright light in my face there, so it'll shine me up and we'll just glow, right? Anyway, so this is, how do I say it? How do I say this? I don't know. Let's start this over. So, we got a nice bright light in our face. Sorry for that, nice and bright, but anyway, another tool out of the pit of despair that has been rescued, has been repaired, and now we can finally use it. I tell you, nothing drives me crazy worse than having a tool that I kind of need and have it not working. You know, sometimes, you know, you get other stuff going. You get so many other things going that you don't take the 10, 20 minutes it would take to make a very simple repair, and I'm very guilty of that. And it's really a bad habit to be in. You know, you get to, you have something kicking around that's been broken for years, and you know it's only going to be a $5 or $6 part to fix it. You know it's going to be a quick job. You always tend to find something else to do, and before you know it, it might be a couple of years later and you still haven't made the repair. So I'm trying to get better about that kind of thing. I mean, so far out of the pit of despair, we have rescued the joiner, the table saw, the drill press, the bandsaw. We've had to repair the bandsaw. We've had to do some work to the joiner, and it's just, you know, we're finally getting some things in order. We're finally getting some things set up to where we can use it and make life a lot easier. Now, I did work on the draw knife quite a bit last night. I didn't really run the camera because I didn't even get out here until like 10 o'clock, but that's where we're at right now with it. I've got one of the handles done and put on, and I need to get the other side done. I'm not really liking these big, bulky, hidden tang handles on here. I think moving forward, when I make these, I think I'm going to make them with scales. I just like the look so much better, and they're so much more comfortable to use. And I think it gives me a lot more freedom on the types of wood that I can use, because you're not relying so much on the wood part for the strength of pulling that back. You're relying more on the metal full tangs. So we use Loctite epoxy quick set on this. I think I have it here somewhere. But quick set like Loctite epoxy, it's a 5-minute set, works pretty nice. The collet on there, that is a piece of 1-inch copper L pipe, and we hit that with the deburring wheel to shine it up, and we kind of blended it in. I'm just not, I mean, it'll work fine, it'll look good when we're done. I don't know, just something about it I'm not really liking, but I honestly, I'm not going to start this one over because of the handles. I just got to make sure I get them to a size that's comfortable to use, and I guess we'll just go from there. But and then I kind of have to try to match the other side to it, and that's always a struggle for me, making two things that are exactly the same. But I think when we get to the next one we're making, this will be our first one that we'll put up for sale. Right now it's just a dirty, lumpy hunk of 1080 steel, but I think we're going to leave the tangs really wide. I think what we'll do is we'll fuller out around the edge, and then the rest we'll do tang. And I think we can make these look a lot nicer, a little more presentable. Like I said, I mean, this looks fine, but I just, like I said, just not digging it too much. I don't know why. I didn't like it on the last one we made either. You know, I just wasn't, and I should have learned my lesson then, but you guys know how that goes. So the belt sander, the belt grinder, whatever you want to call it, works pretty well. Able to take down steel fairly quickly. Now this is a thick hunk of steel. This was going to be our first bushcraft type knife, but it's kind of a dud. I don't really like it, but there's plenty of steel here. There's no reason for me to waste it. I can actually reforge this out into a shape that's a little more pleasing, a little bit thinner. Half the work's already done, so that'll be kind of nice. And I guess we'll go from there. So we'll make one of those. Basically what I want to do, so because I'm trying to get into making and selling tools, I kind of want to perfect one thing at a time. I want to get the draw knives down to a point where I can turn them out quickly, efficiently, and have them just right every time. And I'm kind of picky about that kind of thing because, like I said before in a previous video, I don't want to send a turd out to somebody. I want it to be something that I would like to have in my own toolbox, something that I would like to use. And this will be one of those, definitely. But like I said, we can definitely do that one better. So I'm rambling on at you guys. I know it's... with all these late night videos, the content just isn't quite what I want it to be right now. I'm not quite putting out, I don't think, as good as we used to when we had full daylight and things like that. A lot of the timber frame videos, when I go back through the old ones, sometimes I think they're a little bit better done. It's gotten easier to talk to the camera, it's gotten easier to interact with you guys, but I definitely definitely got to get back to doing things a little bit the way we used to that really helped this channel grow. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, have a good night, everybody. I will catch you on the next one.